Sometimes distressing testimonies about murder-suicide, which viewers may find upsetting.
When you buy a grave, you don't ever buy it thinking that you're going to put your children in before you.
Where does that come from? Where do you hide something like that in yourself?
I've always said that I've never blamed it, and if I don't blame it, why should anybody else? That's the way I look at it.
I will never forgive John for doing what he did. Why did he do it? Why didn't he take me with him?
Well, where we are today is Ballinkillen. I think it's about 300 odd people living in the community. It's a small village. It's got one shop, one primary school, the church and the community centre and the GAA pitch. And it's a very, very tight community, a very caring community. People support each other. It's a good place to be. It's a good place. I can see the church from the back of the house. I can see the graveyard from the back of the house. So yeah, everything is in eye distance. I went over to Saudi Arabia and I was there for about 1.5 years when I met Sanj. I was attracted to him physically. He was tall, dark and handsome. Very easygoing and he was just a nice guy. He was, and in as much as I'm contradicting what he did, he was a good dad. He was a good dad. And the boys absolutely adored him. Owen was quite a sensitive wee boy. He was shy in his early years, but a good kid. Quite serious, but with a really dry sense of humour. He loved sport. He would try it all, but his passion was hurling. He had a great ability to calm maybe a child that was a little bit more unruly, so he cared. He really, really cared. My big brown-eyed boy. Rory came along when Owen was almost 5. He was a fantastic little brother, much more confident from very early on. He was the little imp, the monkey, had a really, really cheeky sense of humour. Just really bright and a happy kid. I found out about 10 days beforehand that Sanj had embezzled money from our local community. That was the first indicator that there was a problem. As it turns out, it was gambling, the stock market, that he was involved in. I would have considered Sanj to be one of the most honest people that I'd have known. So for him to do something like this was completely out of character. I was in shock and trying to come to terms with it and trying to work out what we were going to do. So those 10 days were pretty, tough between myself and him. I tried to keep that from the boys. I didn't want them to be upset by it or to be aware of it, really. Owen knew that Sanj had done something wrong. Sanj told him that. But, we went to Duncannon the weekend before they died because that had been planned and I didn't want that to change. And I really, really wanted them to still enjoy their summer. So as far as I was concerned, we kept things normal. At the time, he asked me, was I going to kick him out? Were we going to separate? And I remember saying that I didn't know. I don't know where it would have ended ultimately. He didn't give me the chance to find out or to be there.
I met my husband Thomas here in Charleville, and I ended up, I suppose, what would you call it, falling in love. That was 30 years ago now. And we got married, and we raised our family here. Everyone around me were having babies. We had tried for a long time to have a family. We were married for years, we had no children. And I had a lot of miscarriages. We were very, very badly desperate to tell you the truth. And then one day I rang, but they'd call a fostering agency. Shortly after that then, we got a lovely little baby boy. John was a very quiet child, God bless him and save him. He didn't go out looking for trouble or anything like that. No, he would be in home most of the time and loved his computer games, and he loved the ponies, loved football and hurling and that. He'd done a little bit of boxing. Turned out to be a fine, lovely boy, God bless him and save him. Gentle giant, we used to call him sometimes. I got pregnant with my twins, Thomas and Betty. The age difference would have been 11 years. It was a fantastic time because we had previously lost our first little baby that we had. Petty was like a March hare. He was wild and he seen no danger. You could go out the back door and Petty could be running along the top of the shed. Whereas Thomas, God bless him, was completely different. He'd, "Oh, get down, you'll get hurted." He was always kind of minding him. Thomas would come out and help you in the kitchen, chat away. Great little boy to help you clean up. And, you know, they were two different children, but yet they were twins. He loved him, I think, from the minute he seen him, God bless him and save him. He went away with him and he'd play football and the whole lot there and come back. He'd never hit him now or roar at him. It was always, "Oh, you boys," and the hand around him, and they were all his brothers and that was it. And they all looked up to him as their big brother. He was never violent or anything like that. But then one day, he kind of gave me a shove up against the wall. "Are you trying to poison me?" And it was then I knew that the boy that was standing in front of me wasn't mine, he wasn't right. And I know it was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I had to go to a court and get a barring order. And I had to ask the judge to help me, to get John help. He always knew that he was adopted. And then I got a phone call from the adoption agency, social workers in Dublin, saying that he had wrote him a letter saying that he wanted information and that he was entitled to it. And that if he didn't get it, he was going to do harm to himself. And I asked her on the phone, I said, "Look, please," I said, "whatever information John needs," I said, "please give it to him," I said, "so he can close that book," I said, "in his life." He still ended up in limbo at the end of the day. If I knew at the time that John was as sick as what he was, I would have made sure he had his proper medication. And I wouldn't have left him with a responsibility of the boys on the day that I left the house.
My father was from Ballinkillen originally, and his father was from Ballinkillen, and my mother was from Mogeely, which was about 7 miles away. All my brothers and sisters are based in Ballinkillen. It's a lovely small seaside resort, which is lovely in the summer, a bit small but dreary like everywhere in the winter. Everybody knows everybody in Ballinkillen, yeah, which can be a good thing. I met John roughly 6.5 years before we got married. John was tall, dark and handsome. He was quiet, but you know, we socialised every weekend really, like any normal person would. He didn't seem to portray any symptoms of depression at the time at all before we got married. So we got married in 2000, and 6 weeks afterwards, John had an accident in where he worked, and he suffered with post-traumatic stress disorder. That accident did change an awful lot of things, you know. John stopped going out. He hurt his back as well. He wasn't able to drive. He was out of work for nearly 2 years. So our socialising stopped really 6 weeks after getting married. It was a very, it's very hard to deal with, you know. That was the first instance really of John suffering with a psychiatric illness. I don't believe that he ever recovered from that illness. Zoe was born on Friday the 13th of August 2004. There was a thunderstorm outside, which was amazing for the middle of summer. John was very happy at the time, you know. She was a lovely child. She was bubbly, very sporty, involved in gymnastics, judo. She was in first class in school. Outgoing, very outgoing. Little girl. She was 6 since the August, but I suppose at one stage she had to make a choice between Irish dancing and gymnastics. So she came from gymnastics straight to Irish dancing, and she was just jumping and hopping around the place, which was hilarious at the time, you know. Ella was born on the 2nd of July in 2008, and she was very mischievous. Whereas Zoe was, I suppose, quieter. Ella, she knew what she wanted, and she was mischievous, whereas she was always pulling Zoe's hair. So these are the memories that I have that you don't get from anything else, really, you know. That a child, the joy and that children bring you, you know, the innocence. I do believe that, you know, it is a gift having children, but yeah, beautiful 2 little girls. John minded Zoe and Ella 2 days a week, and we had a childminder, Anne, who minded Zoe and Ella the other 2 days. John always said that he felt good when he was occupied, so when he was minding Zoe and Ella, he felt better. And he was a good father. Family life was good. I was working 4 days a week. John was working maybe 1 or 2 days a week as a JCB driver for a local firm. But recession had hit, and I think he was worried about finances, about work, I suppose, you know, being the breadwinner for the family, and worried about, I suppose, everything in general. And that's when his depression came back.
He had said to me earlier in the day that he would take the boys out in the afternoon, and he was heading off into Carlow to go bowling. And he just gave me sort of an afternoon to myself. Said goodbye to the boys. It probably got to about 9:30 and I started wondering where he was. It wasn't that unusual. It was summer holidays. You know, I didn't really think too much of it. I tried phoning his phone, but there was no reply, and then I discovered that he'd actually left it upstairs. Another hour went past and I started getting anxious. I couldn't find the key to the second car, so I had to phone my brother, and we went into Carlow just to see was he in there somewhere, because even still at that stage you're not really thinking that there's anything wrong. There was no sign of him in Carlow. Came back home, and I just kept hoping as we were driving up the road to the house that the car would be here, and it wasn't. So at that stage we came in and I phoned the guards. The rest of the night is somewhat of a blur. There were guards in and out, and I had to get photographs of the boys and things like that. So there were people kind of coming and going a lot for that evening. I called various people then that I thought he might have gone to, including his brother up in the north. I also, in my head, thought that he might have just gone to the UK over to his mum. So we phoned his mum at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and he wasn't. And that's when you started to kind of lose a little bit of hope. But at the same time, you know, it was like, he has to be somewhere. He's just hiding somewhere. Are the boys frightened? Are they wondering what's going on?
They were reported missing at 1:30 a.m. this morning. Mr. Chada left his home at 6:30 p.m. yesterday evening with his children. At the time, Mr. Chada was driving a green Ford Focus.
You know, it was getting worse. You were getting more and more scared. Honey, I wouldn't let myself.
All day long, road signs along the major routes accompanied the search for the two boys and their father in the hope that drivers may help track the missing children.
Then I went into the bank that morning to see if there was any activity on the account. Then one of the detectives came and had to give a statement, and I was in the midst of that statement when my mobile rang. It was a number I didn't recognise. So I picked it up and answered it, and it was Sanj. And he just said, the boys are dead in the back. And so I kind of lost it at that stage, and I was like, no way, they couldn't be. So the detective took the phone at that point, and I remember screaming, and I remember sitting on the couch just staring at the detective and going, please tell me my boys are okay. And I remember the seriousness of his face, and I remember him saying, Kathleen, he couldn't confirm at this point. He had to wait. I wanted somebody to say, that's not my boys, and that they're okay, but it wasn't.
This evening, that nationwide search was stood down. Gardaí were alerted to a single-car collision outside the town of Westport in County Mayo this afternoon, where the two children were found dead. Their father's injuries are not believed to be life-threatening.
Apparently he was attempting to kill himself. It was a very, very pathetic attempt if that was the case.
The scene was discovered less than 14 hours after Owen, Rory and Sanjeev Chada were reported missing.
I afterwards discovered that the boys died somewhere around about 5 o'clock in the morning. So for all that we were doing throughout that day, it was too late.
We had met a man in Dungarvan, was selling one of the old barrel-top wagons. This was a small little miniature one. And the boys had seen us, all four of them, and they were mad about it. So we dealt for the wagon. Then we made the arrangements then to go down. We had to collect the wagon. So John got me with him, said to me, I'll collect the boys for you, Mummy. He said to me, if you lay me the price of the diesel. So I said, if you take them in your own car now, and make sure you put in the booster seats and stuff, so and strap them in properly. So we went down to Waterford anyway, and we got the wagon, got a cup of tea, and we were coming back along. And so we were just coming in through Kilmallock when the phone rang. It was John. And he said, well, just go through to Prairie, son, so I think we should be home in about an hour. So everything all right? So the children all right? Yeah, Mummy, he said, everything is fine, he said to me. Yeah, he said to me, Paddy wants to talk to you. So we put Paddy on the phone, and he said to me, Mummy, did you get my wagon? And I said, yes, and said to him, I got it. I said, it'll be lovely now. And he said to me, I love you, Mummy. I said, I love you too, son. I said, be a good boy now, say for John, won't you? And he said, I will. Put me back on the phone to John, and I was talking to John for a few minutes. Again, as I said, no change in voice, no change in attitude, nothing. Only I'll see you when you come home, Mummy, he said to me. Don't be in any hurry, take your time. But apparently, about 15 minutes after that phone call, something terribly went wrong with John. And I lost my 3 boys that day.
A trampoline, swings and a slide, all sad reminders of the twins who spent hours enjoying playing outside their house at Deer Park in Charleville. Thomas and Patrick O'Driscoll, described as lovable rogues, had just finished up in school when their older brother Jonathan collected them and brought them home in the afternoon. but for some bizarre and unknown reason murdered them shortly afterwards.
I think any mother's nightmare was to turn the corner and see crowds of people and yellow tape wrapped around my house. Before I knew it, there was a woman guard talking to me. I just asked her to find my son John, and I asked her not to hurt him because he didn't know it. He wouldn't have done this. She came back about an hour after, and she put her arms around me and she said to me, "I'm so sorry, Miss Suddersk," she said to me.
A few hours later, the body of 21-year-old Jonathan O'Driscoll was found around 15 miles away in Buttevant. Gardaí say he died by suicide.
It was just like a nightmare that you thought you were going to wake up any minute and this wasn't going to be happening. What a nightmare that went on. I was supposed to go on until the day that we all pass away.
Born in London, in Cricklewood, and moved back to Wexford then in 1977, so 40 years ago. So I've been in Wexford ever since. I met Sharon was actually in a nightclub in town. Started chatting and kind of went apart from then on. Sharon was very quiet, but once she got to know her, she's a lovely person. We had a lot of fun times together, sitting down just talking or listening to music. We started living together, and the family wasn't planned, but we got a nice little surprise then on 24th of September 2000 with Michaela come along. It was brilliant the way it worked out, you know, it sort of all fell into place. And then Abby was born then on the 24th of September 2001. And then later on that year, the 20th November, we got married. Michaela, she was very, very much like her mother. Very quiet, showed even more than when Abby came along, because she was like a second mother to her. You know, she was the big sister, but she was always cuddling her, making sure she was safe. And I mean, they were never apart, you know, so. Whereas Abby now, she was a bit wild. She had no fear, bubbly, like, full of fun, full of development. I've always said, and I always will, Sharon was a brilliant mother with the kids. She was great with the kids, and always lively with them. You know, always, she'd be one of the kids half the time playing with them, you know, so no, there was never anything. I never worried about the kids when they were with her or anything like that. Myself and Sharon had split up the previous year. Obviously things weren't going right. We tried to make it work again and just didn't work out. And the last time I had the children, it was Patrick's Day, 2005. And that was the last time I seen the two kids until 2 days before they died. I was trying to get in contact with family services and stuff like that to, you know, so I could get access to the children and get regular visits and whatever. So I think that's what sort of caused a few of the problems then as well, you know. She might have thought I was trying to take the kids away or whatever, I'm not sure. But I mean, that was never on the cards anyway. I just wanted to see the two kids, so. A few of us were all going to Cork for a poker tournament, and I was in the supermarket getting some stuff for the trip away on the Thursday, and I bumped into them. So I spent about 10 minutes in the supermarket with the two kids, and that was the last time I seen them, so.
It was a Tuesday morning, the 16th of November 2010, and the alarm went off, and John nudged me anyway and he said, "Get up, it's 7:30, and I said, "Oh, rub my back there, you know, my back is aching." So he did rub my back, but he did seem a bit tense or nervous, but this wasn't unusual. I left home about 10 to 8 o'clock for work. That morning I was worried, but I suppose there were many days that I was worried going to work, but I would always ring to see how things were and everything was okay. I always did that anyway, you know, every day, and had kind of like Zoe and Ella were always fighting for the phone, to answer the phone, so. But that morning No one answered the phone. On my way to work, I rang John's sister, asked would she mind, ringing John saying would you ever come down to keep him occupied for the day, knowing that he was a bit agitated. I was ringing the house phone, John's phone, and there was no answer, and John's sister came back and she wasn't getting any answer either, so an hour later I decided I'd drive home to make sure everything was all right. Well, I was aware that there was a crash up the road and the guard wouldn't tell me, who was in the crash or what the story was until my brother had met me and told me what had happened, that John had killed Zoe and Ella and he had crashed into a wall and killed himself. I think I just didn't believe. I didn't want to believe what I'd heard. And driving past my own house, there was a guard standing outside, and my brother said, do you want to ask him, do you want to go down? And he said no, I wasn't allowed. But I think because I didn't see what had happened to Zoe and Ella, in my own mind, I couldn't believe what I had heard. John had never been physically violent towards myself or Zoe or Ella. It was very difficult living with him when he was suffering with depression, but never had he physically harmed any of us at all, ever. I remember arranging the funeral, the guards being around, obviously because it was an investigation. And when Zoe and Ella's bodies came home, I just didn't want to touch Zoe or Ella because I knew that if I felt them, they would be cold, It was horrific. I think I was in denial for quite a long time as to what had happened. I couldn't believe that John would have done such a thing. Why did he do it? Why didn't he take me with him?
Prior to the crash, the 43-year-old filled up a 5-gallon drum with petrol at this petrol station, then crashed it into a wall just miles from his family home. It's today being revealed that John Butler was being treated for depression, but no one ever thought it could erupt in such a tragic way.
I can't make sense of it. I've looked and searched for letters. Only 13 weeks before he killed Zoe and Ella and himself, he had been discharged from the mental health services, but he was still on the same dose of medication that he was with the past 6 months. I do believe that had I been involved in John's treatment in greater detail, they would have learned about his behaviours at home. I do believe that John went in and told the medical professionals what he wanted them to know and didn't give them a full story or a full picture of what his behaviours were at home,
The whole family was just gone. And all because of a mental problem that was just worse than cancer. It was just hidden and then just came out and swallowed him up.
Wherever there was one, the other was never too far away, said one grieving relative. Mourners heard how the twins were honest, direct and famous for their hugs. Hugs their mother Helen and father Thomas will miss dearly.
We to organise funerals and organise burying the boys.
Just hours before Thomas and Paddy died last Thursday, their parents had bought them a miniature wagon which they never got to see. Today their pony pulled the wagon ahead of the 2 white coffins.
But when you buy a grave, you don't ever buy it thinking that you're going to put your children in before you.
I suppose it was around midnight from Sharon's mother, wanting to know if I'd heard from Sharon that day. And her and the kids said that her and the kids were missing. Walking up and down the hotel room that night, and I got a couple of calls during the night, checking up, and there was no word. So in the morning, I told my brother.
It was early enough, and he just said, Sharon's missing, like. And he said, I said, what? And he said, we got a phone call and Sharon and the kids are missing, like. And I said, right, let's go. You know, so I said, give us 10 minutes, we'll just pack up quick and we'll just head back to Wexford.
We came down, travelling back down from Cork, and I was in contact with her mother the whole way down. And I just knew halfway down that there was a problem, that there was something major gone wrong. I just heard it in her voice.
You know, we were all worried, but then we were saying, she's you know, she's probably in her friends or somewhere, like, you know, don't be worrying her all or whatever. And I kind of really got a horrible sensation just when we got to the bridge in New Ross.
Got back to Barntown, called into Sharon's mother's house, and she told me that the three of them were gone. That was a tough time. Like, I just remember crying on the road, and it was pouring down rain.
I just seen Barry coming out at the front door, and he ran out into the middle of the road, and he was screaming, like, and I just said, stop the car.
Vinny come back, my brother, and picked me up. We went in, we had to tell my parents then.
And I said, Sharon and Abby and Michaela said they're dead.
It's difficult to believe what was discovered here on the tranquil shores of Cat's Strand in Wexford. 29-year-old Sharon Grace, 4-year-old Michaela and 3-year-old Abby were found together by local fishermen yesterday. Locals say the small community is devastated.
Remember very little about the funeral. Well, the one thing that I can remember was reporters up in the trees taking photographs. That really annoyed me. It kind of made it like a circus, the way it was reported. And even the words murder, suicide, things like that. It's so hurtful when you're in that situation. You know, there are proper words for it. You know, use them. Reading things like that, knowing what Sharon was like, and then she's portrayed like that, that made it 10 times worse. Still couldn't understand how it happened, because Sharon just wasn't like that. She'd never harmed the kids. She loved the kids so much. Maybe that's why she did do what she did, because she loved them so much, you know. So that's the only thing I can think of, really, being honest.
I had met with the funeral director already, who was a great support, and they put a lot of pressure on to get the boys released. They were released on the Wednesday, and he went straight over, brought them home, so they were back home together for those final nights, which was lovely, actually, and is the only way of describing it. How do you describe, you know, a wake for your two children? But it was lovely for me, because I got to spend those last couple of nights with them. And that was important. It's important.
The two hearses drove side by side as the young brothers were brought from their home in Ballinkillen to the local church. Their grief-stricken mother Kathleen walked between the hearses carrying her 2 sons, supported by her own family members, as did the boys' 14 cousins, singing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star as they walked.
I look at photos of my boys and go, how can anybody do something like that to 2 beautiful, beautiful boys that they profess to love?
The 43-year-old was arrested and brought to Westport Garda Station, where he was questioned until midnight last night.
When he was pressed again as to why this had happened, Sanjeev Chada said, money. I ruined everything.
Sanjeev Chada spent his first night behind bars here in Castlereagh Prison last night.
Where does that come from? Where do you hide something like that in yourself?
This morning, Mr. Chada's solicitor told the judge he had concerns for his client and asked that he be watched and psychiatrically assessed. However, when asked by the judge if this was for a fitness to plea, Mr. Hanley said it wasn't and withdrew the application.
He didn't have any psychiatric history, he had no mental health issues. So where does it come from? You know, all he had to do was walk away, really. Actually, all he had to do was stay and face what he'd done. Sand wrote a number of letters after. One to the boys where he talked about the fact that he wanted to be there for them. He wanted to be around to teach them. And as I said, to teach them what? To teach them to lie, to cheat, to kill. It makes no sense, and it will never, ever make any sense that he did what he did. You're dealing with the grief, you're dealing with the loss of Owen and Rory and that, but you're also dealing with the thought that you lay next to this person every night.
The jury took just minutes to return a verdict of unlawful killing in relation to the deaths of Owen and Rory, whose father last month began serving a life sentence after pleading guilty to their murders.
But we know that life doesn't mean life in this country, so he'll get out of jail at some point. There's a part of me that thinks that I'll end up bumping into him over the grave someday in the future. That bothers me, because he shouldn't. his life sentence.
Graves. But I won't tell lies, when I go to the graves, it's like a piece of me is missing every time I do go. And it isn't easy to walk into a graveyard and look at a photograph of 3 strapping young boys. Probably have me torture with girlfriends now if they were alive, you know. These are things you're going to miss. My goal would be, I would like to explain to younger children that it's not wrong for a small child to come up and say there's something wrong. I would like to get in there and try to be a part of that. I'd like to be a part of suicide awareness in the schools and get the word out there more. That kind of takes a load off your heart, knowing that you're after probably helping someone else. Some other child won't go through it. Some other parent won't go through it.
16th of April, obviously, the day they died, and the 24th of September. That's the 2 girls' birthdays. They're 2 really tough days. Every year, for those days, I go out for a walk out to Catstown, have a chat to them. Our generation wouldn't have talked about things. Whereas if you catch people young and get them to talk and get them to open up. You know, I think things like that should be mandatory in school. You know, that's where you want to catch it, in secondary school, you know. Educate. Have it part of the curriculum. That you talk about things like that.
I try to run away from it, but you can't run away from it no matter where you go. And if someone asked me, are you sorry you ever met John? I would say no, because I wouldn't have had Zoe and Ella, and that was a gift. I believed that I only had Zoe and Ella for a short while, unfortunately, but the joy that they brought, I don't think I'll ever experience again, and I have those memories. I do believe they're with me. But it is very hard to get up every day and knowing what I had and the joy that Zoe and Ella brought me, and to have they had their lives taken by their own father is horrendous. And I believe that it could have been prevented because of his mental illness. That is what killed my children. So that's why I'm campaigning for changes to the Mental Health Act, for families, you know, spouses and partners to be involved in the treatment without breaking patient confidentiality.
I do firmly believe that I will be reunited with them, that I will be with them at some point in the future, and that they'll be waiting for me. This is just my life, and I'm living it the best way I know how. There have been moments, and I know I'm not suicidal. I know I don't want to take my own life, but there are many, many times where I wish I wasn't here. And that's not to say that, you know, I need to go into a decline either. It's important, and that's the thing, re-engaging with life has to happen. So I do it the best way that I
From the 9-1, switch that over, that's the young blonde. I was at the West Coast, now I'm in the East Coast. Saw you when